In this video, we're going to go over the basics of video editing, and I'm going to tell you why I personally use Adobe Premiere Pro. Now, I just want to preface this video with this. It doesn't matter what editor you use, as long as the editor you use works for you and you know it well enough to get the best out of it. So the debate about if Adobe is better or Blackmagic, all of that stuff is irrelevant in this video, and I'm not gonna get into that. So I just wanted to preface the video with that. Now, if you're new to video, or if you're thinking about becoming a creator or making your own movies, videos, or whatever it may be, you may have never heard of Adobe Premiere. And you're asking yourself, what in the world is Adobe Premiere? Is Adobe good or bad? Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'm gonna answer all of those questions. But before I do, I just want to explain what editing is and why you want to use it. Now, editing video is, in a nutshell, the process of organizing your footage, chopping, cutting it in such a way that it makes it seamless and it tells a story. In a nutshell, editing takes out the pointless parts of the video that don't need to be there. It could be mess ups, it could be pauses, it could be if you stutter, it could just be something that you no longer feel is good enough to make the final cut of the video. Here's an example of a cut that you would want to make because it doesn't really let the videos. Now you see that if I leave those in there, your attention is going to be taken away and you're going to focus on the thing that I messed up on versus the content that I actually want you to focus on. And this is one of the things that editing allows you to do. Now, when you're talking about films and things like that, editing can take you from one scene to the next, and that progresses the story along. You can think of edits as like pages in a book or chapters in a book. At the end of one chapter, you flip the page and now you look at a new element, or you look at a new character, or you're introducing a new scene, or you're at a new location, or whatever it may be. But this is what editing does. Now, Adobe Premiere is video editing software, also known as an NLE, or a non-linear editor. And basically what that means is you can bring your footage into this program and you can edit it in such a way where you don't have to edit from start to finish. In the olden days, when they recorded on actual film, they would have to go through the film from beginning to the end, cutting and splicing in different scenes and different things that they wanted. And they had to start from the beginning of the film and go to the end. But because of digital, we can now jump around. We can bring our footage in, we can go to the end, chop that off and bring that to the beginning, or we can go from the middle, chop that up and take it to the end or the beginning and mix it up and match it however we want to do it. So there's a lot that we can do in a short amount of time. So consider yourself lucky, blessed, whatever you want to call it, to be able to use digital editing in today's day and age, because it wasn't always so simple. Now, right about now, you may be thinking, well, why did you choose Adobe Premiere? I mean, there's DaVinci Resolve, there's iMovie, there's Final Cut, there's Avid Media Composer, and the list goes on and on and on. Well, the reason that I chose Adobe Premiere Pro is very simple. I started out doing photography, and with photography, I needed a program to edit photos, and that was Lightroom and Photoshop. And at the time, they had a package deal where you could get the whole Adobe suite for like $49. So that's what I did. I got the suite, and along with it came Adobe Premiere Pro, Adobe Audition, After Effects, Lightroom, and the list goes on and on and on. And it just worked for me. It was simple. Everything was right there in one space. And that's why I have Adobe Premiere, and I never left it. Now, there are different tools out there that may suit you better, and it all depends on what it is that you are doing. If you're gonna do films, if you're gonna do short stories, if you're gonna do documentaries, if you're gonna do YouTube, whatever it is that you're doing, you need to pick the editor that works best for you. Now, if you're new to this, I would recommend checking out some of the free editors. If you are on a Mac, there's an editor, iMovie, that comes bundled with your Mac. Now, this is not the greatest editor, but it allows you to cut up your video, which is very important. Even if you have an iPhone, you can edit right there on your iPhone. Again, the thing is to choose which works best for you. Now, right about now, you may be thinking, okay, I hear you on the Adobe Premiere and why you got it, but what about the other editing software that's out there? Well, there's a lot of different editing software to choose from, like Final Cut, iMovie, Power Director, Avid Media Composer, Blackmagic, DaVinci Resolve, and the list goes on and on and on. Now you can use any of these editors, but some of them have their own unique features and some of them are specific to certain operating systems. Like iMovie and Final Cut are exclusive to Mac. So if you don't have a Mac, then you won't be able to use these editors. Whereas things like Adobe Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve are on both platforms. So you can use that on Windows and on Mac. Now I kind of approach editing the same way I do cameras, is start simple first and then build your way up. So what I mean by that is if you have a Mac, then use the built-in software like iMovie. It's free. You don't have to pay any extra for it. Once you buy your Mac, it's already there. So use that to actually edit your videos. Now, a lot of people talk about how crappy the software is, and it's not really if you know how to use it. If you just simply needed to chop up videos and place cuts and transitions in, it's perfect for that. And the other thing is it runs really good because it's native to Apple, especially on the new M1 platform, which I'm not going to get into. Now, the other option is you can use Final Cut Pro, which is exclusive to Mac. Now, it doesn't come bundled with it, but you can buy it. The good thing is it is specifically designed to run on Apple hardware, especially like the M1 platform. You're going to get really good, stable, solid performance on your Mac. Now, Avid Media Composer is another editor. Now, this one is considered the industry standard, and it is for a few reasons. The first reason is because Avid Media Composer was one of the first editing programs that was available that allowed you to work in groups. So if you had a large group of editors that was working on one project, you could bring all of your files together and everybody could share files and work on the same project. And years ago, that wasn't something that anyone else offered, but Avid Media Composer did. The other thing that made Avid Media stand out above the others was their excellent customer support. You can read stories online where people had issues with their program and they would call in and people would actually walk them through the process of getting things up and running. I don't know if anybody else does that, and I don't even know if Avid still does that, but it's the thing that set them apart early on in the editing software business. Now, the other thing that's interesting about Avid Media Composer is it is the industry standard. If you ever seen Stranger Things, well, that movie was actually cut on Avid Media Composer. Now, the reason a lot of people choose Avid Media Composer is because it can handle large files, like huge projects with a bunch of different clips, and the way that you can organize things is second to none. There's not many programs that can handle things the way that Avid Media can. Now, the next one here is Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve. Now, if you haven't heard of that, then I don't know where you've been. It's really the talk of the town. Everybody talks about how good DaVinci Resolve is. And it's mostly known for being a color workflow editor, but it's starting to become a good basic editor as well. The best part of all this is that it's free with some limitations. Now, you can buy the full version for about $290 to $300. Depending on where you buy it, you can find a deal and things like that. But it's a pretty good program. Now, in order to get the best out of DaVinci Resolve, you're gonna have to know how to color grade and how color works. You're not just gonna get this program and it's automatically gonna make your footage look better just because it's a color workflow program. You do have to know what you're doing in there with power windows and all these different options you get, which is basically masking. So these are some of the editors that you can look at. So really you have to do the work to decide which editor is going to fit you best. I can't tell you which one that is. I can simply tell you how they work and what they offer. And you can also go online and look and see what they offer as well. But I do want to go over some basics that all of these editors share and how to get the best out of it. The first thing is all editors use something called a timeline. The timeline is where you will do all of your cutting, moving, trimming, copying, pasting, and organizing of your video clips. It's also where you can view your entire video project graphically from start to finish. And this is the advantage that the digital editors have over the film editors. They couldn't see their whole thing at once. They had to actually sift through footage, feet of film, to get to where they wanted. And then they had to put marks in there to sync their audio up as well. So it was a lot harder back then. Now, another basic feature of all these editors is the import folder. Now, the reason why the import folder is so significant is because this is where all of your files are going to reside. So any file you have, whether it be B-roll, A-roll, audio, graphics, no matter what it is, it has to come inside of this import folder. Anything outside of the program needs to be brought into the program so you can arrange, manipulate, and do things within the program. And this is true for every single one of the editors that I just mentioned before. Now, one of the keys to get the best out of your software is organization. I cannot stress this enough. If you're not organized, you're gonna have a hard time editing. I don't care how good you are at editing, especially if you're new, you're gonna wanna get organization down. Now, all of these programs give you the option to keep everything nice and neat. With Adobe Premiere, you can create folders for each of your assets. Now, an asset is just something you use in your video. So it could be things like titles, lower thirds, graphics, or whatever it may be. Now with these folders, you can have a video folder, and inside that video folder, you can have a talking head folder. You can have A-roll, you can have B-roll, or you can have however you want, whatever keeps you organized. You can also have a music folder where all your music goes in. You can also have templates and assets that you use all the time. Maybe it's an intro to your video. Maybe it's an outro to your video. Maybe it's a transition. All of these things can be kept neatly in a folder. And the more organized you are, the better editor you will be. Now, although we've been talking mostly about video, audio is a very important part of editing as well. And all of these pieces of software give you the ability to manipulate audio within the program. And this is one of the things I really love about Adobe Premiere. It's something called dynamic linking. Now, there is another program called Adobe Audition that allows you to edit audio in this. So if you do podcasts and things like that, it is an excellent program. You can do things like EQ, gating, compression, all types of effects, and it does support plugins as well. So let's say I had a clip in Adobe Premiere and I wanted to put some effects on it. Well, I can do that in Adobe Premiere, but if I wanted to go farther and do some more complex things, I can simply right click on the audio file in here and click edit in Adobe Audition. Now, once I get into Audition, the clip is automatically brought into Audition. It opens up Audition for me. I don't have to click on anything. I can then go ahead and start editing my audio file to my liking. Once I'm done, I simply hit save and close the program, and it automatically updates my clip in Adobe Premiere. Now, this is what I love. Now, some people say that they would rather have the whole suite all in one, but I like it this way because sometimes you don't want things to get too complex and too full of different panels and windows so that you're just bombarded with all this stuff. And this is one of the reasons I really like Adobe Premiere, the whole suite as a whole. Now, one of the questions you may be asking yourself is Adobe Premiere the best editor out there? Well, it depends. Again, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What are you shooting? What are you familiar with? Have you ever edited before? I do want to stress that Adobe Premiere is a paid program, which means there is a monthly fee to use this program. Some people don't like that. Some people are okay with that. I personally am okay with it because of the upgrading that they do. Now, some other software may upgrade, I'm not sure. Some software is just a one-time buy, and then maybe you upgrade it a couple times, and then after a few years, you pay to upgrade again. Either way, Adobe Premiere allows you an access to a bunch of different things, not just Adobe Premiere in that subscription. So again, you're getting Adobe Premiere Pro, you're getting Audition, you're getting After Effects, you're getting Lightroom, and you're getting Photoshop, and you're getting some other apps in there as well. But those are the main ones that I use for my personal business and for YouTube. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is how Premiere gets a bad rap. If you search online for Adobe Premiere, you're going to see a lot of people saying that Adobe Premiere crashes all the time, it sucks, and things like that. And here's what I found about 80 to 90% of the people that use Premiere don't do. Now, this is true for all editors, but I think for some reason it affects Adobe in a different way, and that is the organization side. With your editor, you're gonna wanna have different drives to store your media on. That's because when you start dragging in 4K files and you start working with large projects, you're putting a lot of demand on your hard drives and your SSDs to pull up all this information. You're constantly reading and writing from drives. So you want to have different drives for different purposes. A perfect example is with Adobe Premiere, you want to have your media disk. On the media disk is where you're going to store all of your video files. So like this, what I'm recording right now will be in its own or on its own hard drive or SSD. Then your B-roll and stuff like that will be on this drive as well. Your music and things like that will be on this drive as well. Now, with all of these programs, they use something called caching or cache. You're going to want to have a separate hard drive for that as well. And this is just going to free up resources so that you aren't writing to the actual OS or your hard drive that's specifically dedicated to your OS, whether you're running on Windows or Mac. This is just going to give you a smoother operation. The last thing you want to do is have a scratch disk. These are just temporary files that the program is using while you're using the program. Now, you can set this scratch disk to also be used by Adobe Premiere Pro, Lightroom, and your other pieces of software that run. And this is another thing that you have to remember. When you're using a bunch of different pieces of software, your regular computer's hard drive is going to fill up with information. So as you edit and things like that, you're going to want to make sure you keep everything as organized as possible. And I found that if you set up your media disk correctly, you're going to have a lot fewer crashes. And I will say that when I was on Windows, the problems that I had mostly came from NVIDIA. Now, a lot of the times, the biggest issue with Adobe Premiere is the video drivers, especially if you have NVIDIA. For some reason, sometimes they don't always play well. But I found that once you find a good driver and you get everything tweaked, just leave it the way it is and things will be pretty good. Now on the M1 Mac, I've had absolutely no problems. It's literally been like a whole new program. I don't know if I'm just lucky or what, but I haven't had a crash yet. And I've been doing YouTube videos and other projects and it's been fine. So I would highly recommend the Apple Mac M1, M2, or any of the Apple Silicon chipsets. Another thing is RAM. RAM is random access memory, and this is going to be memory used by your computer. Once that fills up, then you're going to start getting crashes. This is the case no matter what program you're using. So you always want to make sure you read the minimum requirements that each of your editors will require, and make sure you go above the minimum, because the minimum is just the minimum. And in a real world, you're going to surpass what the minimum is more than likely. So get as much as you can afford. Again, the best editor is going to come down to what you're doing and what you can afford. But I would recommend going as high on the memory as you can, because that is going to make your editing experience a lot better. So I just want to share with you guys really quickly just a couple editing techniques here that I use. And I think these are very helpful. They're basic techniques. They're not anything really crazy, but they will, I believe, make your videography a lot better. So one of the first things I want to talk about is a J-cut. A J-cut is basically when the audio from your next clip comes in before the actual clip comes in. You'll be seeing me, but you will start to hear the audio from the next clip before that clip starts. And this is what a J-cut looks like.
Man, who asked you? Why do you think what you say matters?
I'm your thoughts.
You always getting into my business.
Now the next cut is something called an L cut, and it's the opposite. So instead of the audio coming in first, the picture will change and the audio is still going. So your picture will change first while you still have the same audio that was in the previous clip. Then it will eventually change over to the current audio. And this is what an L cut looks like. Now, utilizing these type cuts right here can make a huge difference in interest in your videography and in your YouTube videos and things like that. Now, if this video was helpful to you, then let me know below and I will do a follow-up to this, and we will actually go into the program and I will show you some different things and different cuts and even how I color grade and do certain things like that. If that's something you're interested in, then let me know down below. But until next time, I'll holler at y'all later. I'm out. Peace.